I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to actually have a chat about the scars and some of the successes. So could you just quickly give us an outline of yourself and your company?
Sure. Thanks for having me here again. It's great to be back. I'm delighted I'm not in public sector or in politics, so I didn't think being a shrewd capitalist would actually be a safer space to be in this room, so that's great. Before I go there, just quick raise of hands. How many people are in academia here versus industry? So raise your hands if you're in academia. Cool. Just, yeah, good to know. So looking forward to the questions. Like somebody else was mentioning, I'm originally from Argentina. I'm an immigrant. I'm not the only Argentinian in the room as well, which is great, which just speaks to a little bit how I came to this country in 2010 to do our first company that we created with a couple of people that you're close to, Nathan Thornbrook and the team, the company called Bacta that became ECS Security, became a Dharma eventually. I had nothing to do with that last part of the journey, but it was one of the first early examples of that kind of startup culture in Edinburgh. I left Scotland in 2012 to move to London to run the London branch of that. And then in 2014, when the company was sold, I left to the Middle East, where I became head of security for a bank over there. And then in 2016, now with 2 kids, I had the opportunity to do it again, come back to Scotland to build Quorum Cyber. And as you said, there was a couple of hypotheses that were powering that idea. I think there was a good opportunity to play around with technologies that weren't particularly yet security and to hopefully solve problems using those technologies in a way that people weren't expecting. At the time, Microsoft, which is our chosen poison, wasn't in that space at all, but we saw an opportunity to do that. So we kind of jumped on the bandwagon, and like most things weren't down to intuition or genius or anything like that. I think they were just down to luck and timing. And the more I do this, now we've been running the company for 10 years. We are 400 people, private equity backed. We have 150 people in the US. We're in 23 states, 3 provinces of Canada. We're at a stage where we can look back and have some lessons learned. And one of them is timing is just absolutely fundamental to the success of all of this.
Can you tell me a little bit about the young Federico?
I can. I think this is a recording of one of the first times we did this together a while back. Look, I'm from Argentina, born and raised, but I'm probably atypical in that I don't like football. I'm vegetarian. I usually tell the joke, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. It's not a joke, actually. It was a different childhood, let's put it that way. So computers became a really safe place to hide, even at that time. And I think, again, timing and luck, I was just in the right ecosystem at the time this thing started blowing up and security started becoming a thing. Like, I went into pen testing before pen testing was a discipline. We weren't even talking about it like that. So I was incredibly lucky that hiding away from my problems ended up giving me a career, but I don't suggest it as an approach for most people.
And what was your computer that you had at that time?
My first computer was a Commodore 64. So age 8, I started programming in that computer. We had something really cool. So at the time, I don't know if anybody knows what a Commodore is here. Am I super alone? Thank you. Great to be in this room. Feel a little bit less alone. So I had the Commodore with the tape recorder before the discs. And in Argentina, there was a radio station that would share games through the radio in a really weird P2P network before. So you would hit record and record a demo of a game. And that kind of got me started into this.
No Spectrum or anything?
No Spectrum, no. Then I went weirdly to a Mac, but I don't talk about that oftenly. And then I moved to a like proper Linux computer because that's what you do.
So what was the route from Argentina to Scotland? There was obviously a route that took you somewhere else, but how did you end up here?
I couldn't even put it on a map when I got offered the opportunity. So it's embarrassing, but I'm happy to admit it. So I was living and working in Argentina, particularly for 2 big consultancies. So I spent the first half of my time there for a company called Deloitte. You might hear about it, but we were working across Europe. So it was a really interesting economics for Deloitte. They had a center of excellence in cyber in Argentina, but they would resell us internally to other Deloitte offices around the world for a fraction of the price. And then we would deliver the work. So I particularly deliver work in Sweden, France, and Belgium. And I think I got paid, like the day rate for 1 day of our work was my month's salary, and everything else, Deloitte Europe, which just was phenomenal. And it was a great salary, so I'm not complaining. Just an interesting way I've had to benefit from the unit economics. The other half of my career in Argentina, I was working for a company called Core Security, Core Impact, if anybody is familiar with the pen testing framework. And I was a pen tester working for, again, from Argentina across the US primarily. So when I was in Denver, Colorado, I met a chap called Nathan Thornbrook, who was a contractor at the time at RBS, and we were both doing a course over there. And I was being offered a job to stay in California, working for your maybe least favorite search engine at the time, but it was a super exciting opportunity. Or this guy who's actually born in the Falklands of all places, not the irony is not lost, living in Scotland, was opening a startup called Vacta, and he wondered if I wanted to do it with him. So option A is to Google California, Palo Alto, or B, move to Scotland, literally couldn't put him up and do a startup, and I went down that path. So sheer luck.
What was the focus of Vacta?
So we had no clue. And again, speaking to kind of the lessons learned. So we started Vacta in order to drive consulting in the PCI ecosystem. So if you remember, the payment card industry launched the data security standard. I was an auditor for that standard. Don't judge me. For my sins, I had worked with some really, really big banks. I was the auditor for Google, for Amazon, for Sony. So I'd done quite big projects in that space. And that's what we thought we would do in the UK. PCI was starting to come to the UK. And we thought that that would be a good business. We did zero business in that space, almost. But we found our niche by sheer luck. One of the big four banks had a report with a lot of red in the audit report. And we grabbed it as a project to turn that red into green. And it was all around monitoring for security threats and detecting threats and doing something about it. So we built, and again, there was a technology there that wasn't meant to be used for security, called Splunk at the time. This is pre-Splunk being a security tool. And we had this idea that I think we can use that to solve this. And we did. And we did it in a quite disruptive way. You were very involved in that. So after we fixed the technical problem, the challenge to fix after that was who's going to run this thing 24/7 and monitor. And at the time, banks were outsourcing a lot of that to low-cost regions like India, but without getting the value that they were hoping for in return. So we decided to have a Scottish outsourcing model that we tested with Bill and Napier at the time. And we built the first kind of Scottish graduate build program to run the security operations center of one of the four banks, and disrupted the kind of Indian outsourcing business at the time.
Could you just outline Quorum Cyber as to where it is just now? I know that you outlined it earlier. And what is your vision for the company? I mean, obviously, someone's going to come along and buy the company, and you might become very rich and so on. But what's your general focus just now on the company?
Yeah, look, I mean, second bite at the apple of startup, right? I think there was a personal vendetta of I want to try doing it my way and see if I can take some of the lessons learned from that first startup and do it differently. So that was the more kind of ego-driven side of it. It was I want to have another stab at this, but with closer control. So that was kind of how it all started. Meets also the kind of what we thought was a technical and business opportunity of the big three hyperscalers. This is 2016, right? So Microsoft, Google, and Amazon really being heavy in security. But if you kind of cast your eye a little bit to the future, you could see that people wouldn't move to cloud if they couldn't trust their data was going to be safe or their processes were going to be safe. So, and our belief was, well, the hyperscalers are going to have more telemetry about that than anybody else. So it stands to reason that they're not going to just give away that to third parties to solve. They're going to have to be good at security, whether they like it or not. And I know Chris Tate from Condatus is here. Identity being the kind of passport to consuming cloud resource, Microsoft has the biggest identity play in the world. Everybody's used to having an identity in Microsoft in Active Directory. For us, it stood to reason that Microsoft would be particularly an early winner in security then, because identity and hyperscale. So we placed our bet. We went full in on designing security solutions within the Microsoft ecosystem, aimed really at the mid-market, the market that doesn't have the capability or capacity to get the outcomes they want by themselves, and they need to lean on services. So we build this glue between Microsoft technology and customer outcomes in a service industry in cyber. And that's what we've done, and that's what we will continue to do. Journey's been exciting. So it's bootstrapped from 2016 to 2020, where we had our first investment deal from a Scottish investor called Maven. That was in June 2020, so 2-3 months into pandemic. The deal started in December, so just pre-pandemic. And we were very lucky that as the world went into shutdown and furloughs, we were freshly capitalized. So we were able to kind of grow through that time in an incredibly lucky and good timing kind of way. In 18 months, we did kind of 7 times return for investors. It was a really good 18 months of growth. We did that again. So this time we signed with a private equity firm in London called Livingbridge, who also was the backers of Adharma. And then we've been growing with Living Bridge until May 24, where we did an investment deal with Charles Bank, now a US private equity firm. And that was, at the time, we were 250 people. May 24, we did the investment, and that was very much aimed at continuing to grow the company quite aggressively. We did 2 acquisitions back to back immediately after that. We bought a Canadian company called Defenda 3 months after the deal. And then 2 months after that, we bought a US company called Kiwu. And that got us to, and they were very different acquisitions, both strategic, one about accelerating footprint in North America, make sure we had customers and people there. The other one, a huge part of our go-to-market and how we meet new customers is at their worst day when they're having a breach. So this was a 16-year-old incident response firm that was in every cyber insurance panel and legal panel. So they capture a huge part of the ransomware economy, I call it, but ransomware cases in mid-market. We've flipped that now to all Microsoft stack, and now we are the largest global IR partner for Microsoft, which is a super cool job to have.
It's really impressive. So why go international? Because you could have had quite a good base in the UK.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We can do, there's some valuation objectives that you have when you take private equity money, right? And even though that's not the vision, there's some obligations there. You can certainly get to what we need to get to just by focusing on the UK economy. I think to a degree, the question was, why wouldn't we? The problems that we were solving were relevant. The way we were solving it was super relevant. Microsoft had and still has a drought of partners that had reached a certain amount of scale and size. So that gives some confidence and trust that you're not going to be acquired tomorrow, for example. And there's a unit economic. The fact that we have most of our team, particularly at the time in Scotland, means that we can compete on price and beat them on quality at a way that American businesses struggle, right? Because your salary, if you care, is about 3 times the much for the equivalent level. So we are able to go to market there with a really compelling value proposition at a price that is differentiated. So why wouldn't we? Was the question.
In the UK, we've seen the M&S and the co-op attacks, and I think the companies are still struggling to get their supply chains back. You think that could have been prevented, and what's the lessons that could be learned from them?
Ooh, dangerous ground, Bill. Dangerous ground. Can it be prevented? Yes. Could they have prevented it? Probably no, right? So we are in the game of this is going to happen, and we know that. These are the axioms. It's not if, it's when. And I think that's part of the problem we have as an industry. It's not like people are spending less in security and they're still getting breached. At one point, are we going to hold ourselves accountable to the outcomes we're there to deliver? And this is a tricky conversation to have, because sure, there's a lot of companies that need to do better. And I'm not saying that there aren't obligations on all of us to do better, but at the same time, we haven't really proven that our model works. Breaches are going up, and we keep telling people you need to invest more. I'm skeptical that we're doing this right. I think we need to have a more educated conversation about risk acceptance, risk reduction, resilience. I think I'd like to believe that we're moving away from the buy this tool to fix this thing. We then moved to risk and trade-offs of risks, and that was an improvement. I think we're getting to where we should have been all along, which is resilience, which is how do you thrive even when you're being disrupted, when you're being hit? And that's a very different spin, because then I think it's a more positive moment than necessarily just invest to produce risk. This idea that we're just insurance, you wouldn't like to spend on us, but you have to. I think it's dated, and it's not necessarily leading to the right conversation. So I'm not answering the question on purpose. What could have M&S done? I have no idea what their posture was. I feel for how the industry doesn't do a great job of having an opinion from the couch on what people should or should not be doing. You have no idea what the life of an incident responder is if you haven't done it. So I welcome civic discourse on this. I think we all have a responsibility, but I'm tired of seeing people on LinkedIn pile on to people that have been doing incident response thinking that they know better. And I think that doesn't help, and we need to do better.
I mean, obviously, companies need to understand the time it will take for them to rebuild their system somewhere else. If they built a cloud, how long, how many hours or days will it take for me to create the whole thing again? And I think that was one of the problems with the co-op and M&S, that their cloud infrastructure really didn't have that resilience.
Well, you talked about supply chain. I think that makes it more complicated, right? So we are now, there is no such thing as one company that is completely isolated in a bubble. It's an ecosystem of companies all delivering that service. And the supply chain is like this second factor, third factor, fourth factor supply chain. Where do you want to stop? Do you stop at the telco that provides the internet? Like, the contagion risk of this problem is enormous. So I agree. If anybody wants to open a startup, supply chain security and third-party assurance is essential. So go for it. There's a huge gap in that business.
How have you seen cybersecurity change over the years?
You're throwing all the easy questions, aren't you? I've seen it become a super relevant topic, which is great. I've seen it grown up. It's lovely to start seeing the first people retire in the field, which is interesting. I think that's going to give us voices with a different perspective that we've sorely needed. I've loved to see how security started becoming less of a technical field, but embracing other disciplines, and how more people were able to access the field without having to be a developer. Some of the myths that we've created where this is essential. I think we've earned, let me challenge that. I don't know if we've earned the seat at the table, but I think we certainly have to be at the table because of the relevance of the problem in today's economy. I don't think it's a forever thing, by the way. I don't think security will be at the board forever. I think security will ultimately be part of operations or resilience. Security in itself isn't a thing. I think it's part of a thing. But I think given how prevalent the problem is today, security has to be at the table. What I don't think we have is done a great job preparing the professionals to be at that table and have not just the technical perspective, but proper financial perspective and an ability to communicate at board at the right level. So how have I seen it change? I've seen it evolve. I've seen it mature. It's a whole university. It's teaching people. It's incredible. When I started, we didn't have any of that, right? But I think we now need to do better in connecting security to the rest of the outcomes that an organization or a business is there to deliver.
Do you have any war stories that you could share with us?
Which kind? Yes, sure. Bad incidents, bad mistakes. What do you want? Depending.
The one that we could probably learn most about. I mean, obviously there's a privacy issue there, but do you have anything that would make our toes curl?
Well, I'll give you two, I guess. Let me start with one. I'll start with an entrepreneuring one because I think that's where probably that's where I'm living these days, right? I'm less in the technical field and much more in the kind of business side of things. And building a business, for anybody in the room, the hands that went up in academia that is looking to ever be part of a startup, I can honestly say it's the most fun I've ever had. It's the best job in the world. It's also the most challenging one in the world, but there was an attribute of that journey that I wasn't aware when I started it. And I wished I'd been made aware. So here's me sharing that one lesson, which is toe curling. There will come a time, and I hope you have it because I think it's super worth going through it, where you're going to have to make some choices that are super tough. And in order to continue to grow or to invest in the success of the firm that you're in, you're going to have to let people that you care about go. And nobody will prepare you for the psychological impact of that being your responsibility. So you're not here just to do great tech things and solve great problems. Sometimes the right thing is somebody that got you to where you are is not the right person to get you to where they're going. And to make that trade-off is the worst day of your life. And you're probably going to have to make it many times. So do this with your eyes wide open, because that was a tax I wasn't sure I was going to have to pay. And when I discovered that it was part of my job, you take it, it's part of the job, it's part of the role, but it absolutely sucks. And it's the worst part of that job. It's not a war story, but it's a
CEO startup isn't necessarily the CEO of an international company. It's a different skill set.
Totally. I've been having to run to stay still. Like I've gone from zero to now 45 million pounds of revenue at a more than £250 million valuation. Yeah, it's terrifying to keep up. And part of my job is to try to keep up. But at some point, part of my job might be to step down because the best person to take this forward isn't me. So I hope I have the wisdom and the counsel around me to call my bullshit when it's over.
And so what's the main growth areas in cybersecurity just now, and which areas are decaying?
Ooh, great question. Well, maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We live in we call ourselves services to differentiate from purely product SaaS solutions. But I was having this super interesting debate yesterday. What is the difference between a services firm and a product firm? And we don't have time for that. But I think services, in my interpretation, which is companies that exist to give businesses or organizations outcomes. So you're not an outsourcer of processes. That was kind of the old way. You're an outsourcer of outcomes, and it's our job to deliver that outcome, abstracting our customers from how we do it. And I think that industry is flourishing, right? More and more organizations around the world are acknowledging that cyber is not something they can authentically do themselves. We talk about this shortage of talent, the 3.5 million missing cybersecurity professionals. I think it's a skewed shortage. It's industry that is struggling to hire them. It's not us. right? Cybersecurity firms are thriving. We can attract talent because what we do is interesting. We work with 250 customers. It's fun. It's a bank that struggles to capture, or a manufacturing firm where cyber is 17th on the chain, right? So I think the services industry of this is flourishing because there's such a need for talent in industry. So I think services and outcomes is great. I think if you go down one level to technology, I mean, everything you're talking about is super relevant, but it's an evolution. I don't think it's because other things are decreasing. I think it's new concerns and new ways to address those concerns are coming to the fore. And so those new technologies present opportunities to solve them. Obviously, AI is a key part of that. And I'm super excited to see just how fast that is moving and how somebody talked about it, I think it was Colin, you talked about how naive some of the things in the paper that you commissioned before were. Even some of our opinions on how AI was going to evolve 6 months ago now look naive in comparison. The speed at which we're being proven completely incompetent to have a realistic future-looking conversation is unbelievable. So we're just struggling to keep up, but it's fascinating.
And so what's the Gen AI tools that are being used to defend systems?
Well, I would say that probably Gen AI is not the most important part to focus. I think agentic AI has a probably more interesting opportunity to be part of the arsenal here. Gen AI has been, so we've used it a lot for enrichment of threat intelligence. For example, we have a super cool threat team that does original research into threat actor behaviors, for example. Like we really spend a lot of time focusing on what are bad guys doing out there. Gen AI has been phenomenal at accelerating our ability to create that research and to publish it and to really correlate different attacks. And that's been phenomenal. But I don't think it was so much a proactive defense tool. We've been able to create code faster, analytics, detections faster, but it was already things we were doing. It's just doing that a bit faster. I think agentic AI, and I'll differentiate these two at a super basic level. This one can affect the universe around it, whereas generative can only, you can have a chat with it or it can create content, but it can really affect the universe about it. Agentic can take action. And I think agentic has an opportunity to really be a non-human colleague that you lean on as much as you do human colleagues. And part of the magic is how do you combine these two in a way that gives you great outcomes, minimizes risk. And I think there has to be a concept of some sort of fairness. And I know the universe isn't fair, but there is a concept of how do we do this in the right way? And that's a huge societal question we haven't started to ask.
How do you constrain it? How do you stop a Gen AI or an agentic agent from changing the admin password? How are you going to be able to sandbox and define the limits of its operation? If it has a hallucination, how can you stop it from doing some damage?
Well, I mean, there's theories. In agentic in particular, for example, we're spending quite a lot of time these days doing quite a lot of research with Microsoft here and their marketplace of agents, Agent Exchange. I don't know if you guys have played with it yet, but they're creating a marketplace for companies to publish their agents. And then you as a company can, like an iPhone app, you can go download the agent from a company and set it loose in your environment. How do you avoid those agents being Trojanized? I think it's fascinating. I think you will create agents to manage the agents, and that's the paradigm that we're trying to follow. Trying to fight AI by human controls, I think is a fool's errand. I think you need to harness AI to be the control that empowers an AI, but clearly there are risks in that, and we're all breaking ground here. I don't think there is a paradigm that fixes it yet. And when we're talking to, again, particularly Microsoft's development teams, and so the people that are leading this, it's not like they're 10 steps ahead. Like they're really just still asking themselves these questions. So I think we are all at a very equivalent level of wonderment with it, but equally the awareness of the risks of it.
Are you starting to see adversaries weaponizing with Gen AI?
Yeah, I think we're saying it a lot in terms of the quality and sophistication of the attacks is certainly accelerating. The payloads are harder to spot. The misinformation, the quality of the bad quality information is really, really important right now. There's an emergence of a category called narrative security. How do you know that the story is real or not? I think that's fascinating. And I think there's only one company in the Gartner quadrant that it's aligned to this narrative security, being used a lot to protect executives. And that's because the impact of AI and manipulating narratives is actually scaling a lot.
So how is Gen AI changing the cybersecurity skill sets? Like when you're looking for graduates in the future, how will Gen AI change what you're looking for?
I think massively. I have a again, theory, it's probably going to be naive in 3 months down the line. But I think I wouldn't want to be, I'm sorry, guys, but I wouldn't want to be an entry career person right now. Because I think right now, everybody's trying to figure out what's the efficiency gain that this can give us and how do we use it while respecting the fact that people need to come into careers, but there's a commercial reality of the cost benefit analysis that you need to do in making that decision. So I think the short-term impact is not great, right, for people trying to break into career. I wouldn't want to be a young developer. I think the second gen after that are going to have embedded these technologies as a way to differentiate themselves. So you're going to have a different education system that kind of prepares them for that, even in the last couple of years. I think there's a sandwiched gen in the middle that is really the victim of businesses trying to figure this out every day. And how do we do it? Carefully, but I think competition is forcing behaviors that are not necessarily the best outcomes for societal good. So we need to navigate that carefully.
And do you think for cybersecurity that there's a differentiation between the open source models such as ChatGPT and the closed source ones? Sorry, I got that the wrong way. The closed source such as ChatGPT or the open source ones like Llama?
Yeah, certainly. But then you go into the question of what's the risk of democratizing access to all these algorithms, right? So I think there's obviously a difference and there's some benefits, but there's also some trade-offs in security. There is an argument for, well, actually if it's advancing too fast, closed source might enable us to protect who has access to it in a way that once you open source it, you don't. Would you trust the most advanced model to be in the hands of Baidu and for them to be able to do whatever they want? Or do we think that some of the models are better if we keep them within some arms control type environment? We're seeing this play out live in terms of nuclear material. I don't think we should be thinking of these things too differently. One of the things that I was really proven wrong 6 months ago, I was having the chat, is I thought that good guys were going to have the upper hand. And I'm very generic in the term, but think about it whatever way you want. Because the power of compute needed to run the models meant that only a few companies had the scale to be able to do that. Basically hyperscalers, right? And if a hyperscaler is running the model in their environment, they're going to be able to detect in general if that environment is being used for good or for bad. And if it's being used for bad at scale, because they run the infrastructure that supports it, they're going to be able to control it. But then algorithms became incredibly more sufficient and they don't require the hyperscalers to run anymore. And that's what the Chinese algorithm proved really quickly. So that entire assumption that we were going to be able to rely on a couple of big companies as the utility to power these things has now disappeared. And you can now have a portable model that doesn't require that energy consumption. So that constraint is gone completely. So I don't know, I'm super torn between the trade-offs of open and closed source models. Again, I just think that I don't think we're having the right conversation at how do we regulate and not let this go crazy, whether it's open source or closed source. I think the commercial competition model creates a toxic incentives discussion that is the reality, but it's unhelpful to getting this right. And we need to get this right.
For any budding entrepreneur or innovator, what are the gaps there just now in AI and cybersecurity that need to be plugged?
AI and cyber. So we've taken an approach. I think a lot of people started going down I want to build something that has AI because there's a lot of valuations being distracted by, I have AI in my thing. So that drove a lot of people to, we need to embed AI quickly. I don't think that has long-term legs. I think these things will become features and commoditized in 3 seconds. So entire categories of businesses that are being created because I have a thing with AI are going to just be absorbed by the models in a way that's going to wipe. So if you want to do it quickly and sell it fast. So I think in 2 seconds, this is going to not have a market. On the other hand, a lot of people have used internal AI solutions to be better at what they do. I think there's merit in that. How do you accelerate efficiencies or margins or effectiveness? Super cool. Be better at what you were already doing by using AI like another tool. So that's good. I think the third one, and that's where certainly we are placing our bet, and I think more is needed, is customers are adopting AI all over the place, right? They're building their own LLMs. They're building their businesses on top of this incredible machine. Nobody's focusing on how to protect that thing, right? So people are concentrating all their data and their processes in these zombies of LLMs that have no security boundaries around them. So how do you detect data breaches? How do you detect injection attacks? How do you prevent privacy breaches of what you're building in that now critical asset in a company? And nobody's put a perimeter around that or figured out how to protect it. So I think if anybody's looking to do something protecting companies' LLMs more than using AI yourself, one, and the other one is one of the dependencies for anybody to do anything in AI is hygiene of data. And the hygiene of data going in is a massively unsolved, horrible problem. So if you want to do something cool for the AI economy, go build a business that enables hygiene of data going into a model, and you're going to solve a huge problem.
I'll ask you 2 questions here. So will AI be a savior, or will it destroy our society? And do you think the singularity, these are big questions.
Jesus, Bill.
I think the singularity, everybody knows what the singularity is.
The moment of AGI?
Yeah, that's right. And obviously Sam Altman is betting his bank on that. And I think Microsoft won't be too pleased if the singularity does happen. But it's a worrying point at which AI becomes more intelligent than us. And I think the recent Apple paper was saying that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors under there. It's not quite as smart as we think it is. So my 2 big questions is, and think of it more society, about your kids' education and the next generation's kids' education. Is AI going to destroy us, or will it make us better as a society? And do you think the singularity is going to happen sometime soon? Big questions, by the way.
I want to take a betting pool. So first of all, I qualify with I am not a specialist in this, right? So I'm having an opinion as Federico Charosky, Argentinian dude that has a company in Scotland. Please do not, I'm not the gospel here. The last research that I read on this is saying that the arrival of AGI is somewhere between 5 to 20 years, right? We moved away from maybe a generation or 2 away to now it's whether it's 5 to 20 and whether that's 10 to 15. Like the way that we're changing our expectations of when is fascinating. So I think the big question is, do we think that the algorithms that we're improving at an exponential rate are the right way to get to AGI? And I think that's the question that underpins this. Or do we need a completely different approach that we haven't at least seen in open society as much? So I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get to AGI through this algorithm. The fact that everybody that has an opinion that I trust and is qualified says yes, and it's within reach, within our lifetimes, let's just assume they're right for a moment, because I think that's the best way to scenario game this, if we're afraid of its impact. So once it arrives, are we afraid of it? I'm terrified of it. And I must admit, I'm probably more in I don't think we have solved some of the fundamental problems like alignment or transparency in a way that, and we're not prioritizing solving the problems of alignment. Everybody knows what alignment problems are. Yeah, the ability to make sure that we don't set it on a direction that then by trying to maximize in that direction, they do everything that's wrong for us just because they're kind of following that prime directive. So we haven't solved this. We don't know how to constrain an AI's ability to go solve the problem that they thought we told them to solve without causing havoc in between here and then. I wouldn't want to get to a point where AGI is legitimate there without a safeguard that enables us to have solved alignment.
It's HAL 2001.
Apparently, yeah. Yeah. So you ask about my kids. I am terrified. I think it'd be awesome if we can get to the utopic future of AI as an enabler for the best of humanity. We don't have a track record of being good at this. So I don't know.
So how do you manage?
Super positive chat, by the way. Yeah, great. Awesome. Welcome to 10:30 in the morning.
Okay, let's get personal. How do you manage to cope as an internationally leading CEO with your family life? How do you unwind? For any of us that might want to become this great CEO, how do you manage that work-life balance?
It's super tough, particularly the travel element. So I have when I started the business, I had twin boys, age 2. They're now age 10, turning 11 in March. So, and I have a partner, I have a wife that's stuck with me. I'm very lucky that my team has been, and by my team, I mean my family. My wife is very supportive of this, and we recontract. We kind of extend the contract every now and then, particularly at every investment point. We go, is this the time to cash out? Like, do we need to protect ourselves and leave, or are we good to go another round? And so far, we keep recontracting together that we do another one. I do have a lot of fun doing this, so I think I wouldn't be able to go back to working at a desk with a holiday policy, because I think I'd die a little bit inside. So I think she knows that this is what I'm enjoying doing, and I get a lot of fulfillment from it. But there's a massive cost, right? I remember a year I was in the US when the kids were building the Christmas tree, and I broke down completely. It was horrible. And you miss things. You miss things that you're not there for. So I guess just make sure you audit yourself. Make sure that this is still worth it, that you're getting fulfillment from it, that the the things that you're missing are not, the trade-off is still worth it. I don't know if I have a right answer. I'm very lucky that I have a family that supports it. But even now, like Father's Day was just now, and one of the kids wrote a card, Oliver, and he was saying, I know you don't get to spend much time with us, but something or other. And my wife had prepared me because she'd seen the card. She went, just look, he didn't do it on purpose. Like he just wrote what he believes to be true. I know you're not getting to spend so much time with us, but we love you, something like that. If I hadn't been prepared, I would have broken down immediately when I read that. So just be careful. I also, not a lot of people know this, I was very sick last year as we were doing the investment deal. They discovered a malignant tumor. Thankfully, I'm okay. But it did bring into sharp focus just how quickly it can all go like this, right? So I guess the lesson for myself is don't just invest for the future because you don't know whether that's going to be there. So you better be happy today, not just aiming that at some point you're going to get to happy some point in the future, because yeah, it can just all go away in a heartbeat.
What's your biggest regret in your career, if you have one? Yeah,
I don't think so. Like I've made mistakes, but they're not regrets because they were lessons that enabled me to get here. I just don't frame it like that. I don't regret. You do the best you can with what you've got at the time, and I think regret is an exercise of self-deprecation that's not necessarily helpful. Sure, learn from your mistakes, but I would do everything that I've done again. I guess there was one thing when I was 16, really, really young, and I was allegedly exploring networks that I wasn't allowed to have access to. I don't know what the statute of limitations for those things are. And I was in somebody else's computer that I shouldn't have been, and I deleted a document because I was a vindictive little kid that just misplaced youth. And the document was called mythesis.doc. And I will forever be haunted by, I hope that guy had a backup, but this is a time when people didn't have backups. So
we've got it on camera, so you're okay.
All right. Hope you cure cancer or something.
Yeah. What advice would you give to get more kids into coding?
Well, that presumes that coding is a good thing to get kids into. I don't know if that's right anymore. Are we not able to use other solutions to code instead of having to learn lines of codes? So let me challenge with, is that still the right thing to do? Don't know. I'd rather we teach kids to think than necessarily teach them how to code. I think when we're hiring graduates, no offense, graduates, a lot of what we're seeing is people that have really good techniques, but are lacking critical thinking. They just don't know how to explain how they got from A to B to C. And I think that lack of critical thinking is probably much more important than learning how to Java or Python.
And is there anything in your career that you've still to achieve?
Oh, good question, Bill. Damn you. I do want to do this. So I think there's whether it's my career or the mission of Quorum Cyber, there is again, probably not heavily influenced by ego, but there hasn't been a cybersecurity services firm in the UK that's reached a unicorn level valuation without having to exit. And I'd love to prove that the UK in particular, and Scotland more specifically, can build businesses that are worth more than £1 billion. We're a third of the way there, and I want to kind of get there within the next 2 to 3 years. So that's something I want to prove that we can do at scale.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for the chat today.